Florida, the sunny paradise of America, once a dream destination for millions seeking retirement, a fresh start, or freedom. But when night falls, another Florida emerges, bare, sinful, and more desperate than anywhere you've ever known. Behind the million-dollar resorts and upscale restaurants, where a meal can cost up to $400, are old RVs lying still like coffins, nestled next to tattered shanties, temporarily pinned with a plastic tarp, ropes, and the last remnants of fragile hope. Florida used to be a place where people came to entrust their dreams. Now it is a place where many lose everything. And while politicians argue over the budget, those who truly need help are sleeping under bridges, going hungry day after day, and waiting for a miracle that never comes. In today's video, we will take you to a Florida not found on the postcard, where the American dream is not just shattered, but crushed in silence. Have you ever imagined that just by driving away from a sun-drenched beach in Florida, once considered America's retirement paradise, you would encounter scenes of dozens of silver tents stretching across the sidewalks, where people who once had jobs now have to sleep under street lights, amidst the smell of garbage and the sound of police sirens? This is not a post-apocalyptic scene in The Last of Us, and it's not a poor town in a developing country either, but right in the middle of Florida, a state that Americans from all over the country once chose to entrust their lives in peace. Florida, the land of warm sunshine, luxurious resorts, and the promise, here, you will live the final part of your life in fulfillment. But the very place is now becoming the final nightmare for tens of thousands of elderly people. Can you believe it? In just the year 2025, in the central Florida area, people over 55 years old accounted for more than 24% of the total 31,462 homeless individuals. Those dry numbers are actually the shadows of people who once lived stable lives, had homes and contributed to society, now having to trade their final dreams for a place to sleep overnight. There is no travel poster to show you that. No airport welcomes travelers with images of makeshift tents set up behind shopping malls, once the dream destination for millions of retirees across the United States. However, those scenes are spreading, from Miami to Orlando, from Tampa to once peaceful coastal areas. They didn't fall into crime or vice. They're not lazy. They're not the chronic homeless people that old stereotypes paint. Some had served in the military, had paid taxes for 40 years. But then just one slip, a $600 rent increase in 4 months, an unexpected medical bill, or simply losing a loved one, is enough to leave them with nowhere to go. Florida is still wealthy. The beachfront villas are still being sold for tens of millions of dollars. The resorts are still full of northern tourists. But just behind those rows of palm trees and sparkling pools lies a truth no one wants to face. This state is gradually losing its ability to protect the very people it once promised to care for. So, if even Florida, which should be the final refuge, is abandoning the elderly, is the rest of America following suit? There are stories that leave us speechless, not because of the tragedy being too horrific, but because it happens to someone who is too kind. And that is the story of Carolyn, a 78-year-old homeless woman living temporarily in a car. She once lived a stable life, once a law-abiding citizen, paying taxes fully, saving carefully, believing that the Social Security program would take care of her old age. But then, life began to spiral out of control in ways no one could have foreseen. 2 months ago, Carolyn was forced to leave her rented apartment because she could no longer afford it. Rental prices in Florida have skyrocketed, not in line with income, not in line with pensions, but at the pace of real estate and profits. And that has pushed her to the final option, living in her car. Every night, She curled up in the front seat, trying to sleep without making her legs swell up even more. Her only meal of the day cost just $2.02, a patchwork combination of canned goods and a few slices of bread. The drinking water comes from a large reusable jug to save every penny. What about bathing? Carolyn takes advantage of the free gym services from Medicare, not just for hygiene, but also for makeup. I have to keep up appearances, she said, because I don't want anyone to know I'm living like this. Carolyn was embarrassed, not because she was wrong, but for the first time in her life, she felt she was no longer considered a part of the America she once believed in.
It can happen to anyone. Don't think it can't, because I never thought about it.
Carolyn's pain does not lie in hunger or cold, but in the feeling of being left behind, ignored by a society that once promised to care for those who have fulfilled their responsibilities. And Carolyn is not alone. In 2019, homeless individuals aged 65 and older made up only 8% of the homeless population in Miami-Dade County. By 2025, that number nearly doubled, 14%. If no action is taken, it is projected that by 2030, 22% of the homeless here will be elderly. Those who once worked, once contributed, once believed that America would not turn its back on them. We used to call it the American dream. But if those who once supported that dream now have to sleep in cars, eat canned food, and hide their shame. Nah. Does that dream still exist? Or have we let it gradually crumble in silence? Carolyn's story is not just a warning about poverty. It is a reminder that forgetfulness is the most cruel form of injustice. And if we still believe in the value of gratitude and kindness, then the voices of people like Carolyn deserve to be heard. Do you dare to believe? In the homeless hell that was once promised to be a retirement paradise, a former prisoner has created a paradise of garbage. A place where elderly people, having nothing left, are cared for with human compassion rather than material wealth. William Butler, a man considered a hero for the homeless, forgotten by society. He once had a fractured past, 23 years in prison, caught up in vices, and prejudiced against the homeless. But it was precisely when he lost everything, when he became part of the community he once despised, that William began a new life, not to atone for himself, but to restore a bit of hope for those whom this world had abandoned. In the midst of Port Charlotte, a once peaceful coastal town in Florida, now quietly referred to as the Forgotten Hell, the makeshift huts are hidden behind the dilapidated shopping mall amid swamps, garbage, and the indifferent gaze of society. No one wants to talk about it anymore. No one wants to look at it. But right there, where many people just pass by, William and two friends who also had troubled pasts chose to start anew. But this time, not for themselves.
I was judgmental myself. I used to judge homeless people, and I thought they were all lazy and nasty. And then when I became homeless, I said I was going to change some things.
That's not an excuse. That is awareness, born from the experience of someone who once looked at the homeless with disdain, until he himself became one of them. William and his team began their journey with the smallest things. They cleaned up every dump, built shelters from old wood and tarpaulin, sturdy enough to withstand the rain, clean enough to no longer be a breeding ground for disease. They have no budget, no subsidies, and no sponsors. It all started with what they found in the trash, with determination in their hearts, and with the rare kindness still left in a place where hope seemed to have run out. William not only saved lives, his team built a community. There is no cash, no violence, only trust, exchanging labor for food, trading warm clothes for shampoo, trading a listening ear for respect. They do not seek to survive independently. They learn to help and live together. Perhaps no one would have expected that amidst a state drowning in a housing crisis, with tens of thousands of people without even a bed to sleep on at night. There would be someone like William, without a title, without recognition, but every day consistently restoring the dignity that society has discarded. William's story cannot erase the crisis spreading throughout Florida. He cannot replace the crumbling welfare system, but in a reality where the light is growing ever dimmer, even a small spark can be hope. If a person who once erred, once considered a burden, can become a support for the weakest lives, then can we, those who were once stable, who once believed in kindness, dare to stand up with them before compassion is finally swept away? If you only know Florida through postcards, with golden sandy beaches and luxurious hotels, then you are seeing only half the truth. The other half they try to hide, because it is too ugly, too bare, and too detrimental to the tourism industry. Just a few blocks away from the million-dollar resorts in Miami Beach are makeshift tent camps, built from tarps, scrap wood, and dwindling patience. There, a family of 4 sleeps together in an old SUV, sharing a can of beans for dinner. Not far away, elderly people stand in line from 4 a.m. just to receive a free meal, sometimes just a cold sandwich and water. That is the reality for thousands of Floridians. Those who come not to take souvenir photos or enjoy the sunshine, but to survive. And living in poverty in a place considered a paradise resort turns out to be even more brutal. On one side are luxury hotels with room rates reaching up to $1,200 per night. On one side are local workers who can't even afford $5 to buy a loaf of bread. While tourists are served cocktails on the deck just below the port, there are people rummaging through trash to find food. They live close to each other, sometimes just separated by a fence, but they are two painfully different worlds. And the paradox doesn't stop there. When tourists complained about the loss of urban aesthetics due to tents set up near tourist spots, the local authorities did not address the root cause. They addressed the image. The homeless were forcibly relocated. The tents were cleared away. Those with nowhere to go are pushed further away, into the swamps, into abandoned industrial areas, or simply disappear from the tourist map. Florida is becoming a meticulously staged theatre, with lights shining on the glamorous facade and dense darkness behind the scenes. They are willing to spend billions of dollars to attract tourists, but cut the budget for building affordable housing. They promote a resort paradise, but forget that those who clean rooms, cook, drive, and maintain the landscape also need a roof over their heads to rest. And if it continues like this, there will come a time when no one will be able to bear the tourism dream that Florida is selling to the whole world. Because when the workers leave, when the community breaks apart, there will be no one to clean the resorts, no one to arrange flowers in the lobby, no one to serve drinks on the deck. Florida may still be a dream destination for tourists, but it's gradually becoming a nightmare for its own residents. Can we continue to call a place paradise if the price to keep it glamorous is the suffering of those who live right within it? Florida used to be a place where Americans came to settle down. Now, it is a place where they are losing a home to return to. For decades, the Florida dream has been a symbol of peaceful old age. A small house near the sea, low living costs, warm sunshine year-round, and a friendly community. But since the pandemic, what was once considered normal has now become a luxury privilege. And the elderly, who once helped build this nation, are being left out of the game. Let's look at the numbers. In just 3 years, the average rent in Florida has increased by more than 35%. Cities like Miami, Tampa, and Orlando are among the places with the fastest rental price increases in the country. In Miami, A one-bedroom apartment can cost up to $2,500 per month, while the average Social Security pension for seniors is only about $1,700 per month. A simple calculation is enough to understand why more and more people have to live in their cars. The problem is not just the rising rent, but everything else is also increasing. Home insurance is rising, property taxes are rising, utilities are rising, medical fees are rising. Meanwhile, the income of the majority of retirees has remained almost stagnant. Some people grit their teeth and hold on, cutting everything, no air conditioning, no supplements, eating only one meal a day. But living minimally also has its limits. When rent exceeds 50% of income, it is no longer tightening the belt. It becomes a fixed poverty trap. Once you fall into it, it's very hard to get out. And the irony is, those who once owned homes, who once had assets, are now losing everything. Why? Because real estate is now a speculative tool, no longer a place to live. Investment companies and large financial funds are buying up houses in Florida, driving prices up and turning the housing market into a massive casino. Local residents are being pushed out of their own homes to make way for short-term Airbnb contracts and luxury rental communities. And when you can no longer afford to buy a house, no longer afford to rent a house, then the only remaining options are living temporarily, living in overcrowded conditions, or not living anywhere at all. The system is not broken. It is functioning exactly as it was designed, profiting from the crisis. And the elderly, low-income individuals, those who cannot keep up with the pace of rising prices, are the pawns. Once, Florida was a place to relax. Now, for thousands of people, it is the beginning of a series of days without a home, without an escape. Maybe you thought you had prepared enough for old age. There is a pension, there is insurance, there is a plan. But in Florida today, even those who had meticulously planned are astonished. Everything is rising faster than any preparations. And when the house, the final symbol of stability, becomes the greatest burden, will anyone in this retirement paradise still have a place to return to? There is something gradually disappearing in the dark alleys, under the awnings of abandoned buildings, among the parking lots and parks in Florida. Not money nor houses, but rather a nutritious meal on the table. When rent prices skyrocket, when shelters are overcrowded, the homeless, especially the elderly, are forced to choose, eat or survive. Many of them choose to go to bed hungry to save on gas money, because if the car runs out of fuel, they will lose their last refuge. A small sandwich can be exchanged for an hour of air conditioning. A bottle of clean water can be exchanged for a chance to sleep peacefully. Even more frightening, the food distribution system, which was once the last refuge, is now also on the verge of disappearing. But now, it too is starting to disappear. In many cities in Florida, distributing food to the homeless in public places is considered illegal. A charity that used to distribute hot meals in Fort Lauderdale was fined and dispersed by the police on the grounds of lacking a food safety permit. In West Palm Beach, the authorities blast loud music all night in the park to drive the homeless away, disrupting their sleep and meals. Worse, local food distribution centres are gradually closing due to budget shortages. Federal funding has been cut, and community donations have sharply decreased during the recession. In 2024, more than 30% of small food distribution organisations in Florida were forced to suspend operations. In a country that was once abundant, where food is thrown away every day, not being able to eat one's fill anymore, it is not a lack, but a kind of deprivation. It takes away the sense of security, it erodes self-esteem, and it raises a cruel question. If even a dinner becomes a luxury, then what else is there to believe in? Florida was once hailed as a place of safety, where the social welfare system was designed to protect the most vulnerable, the elderly, the disabled, veterans, those who had devoted their entire lives to the machinery of America. But then one day, that system stopped responding. The Section 8 program, which was expected to be a lifeline for low-income individuals, now has waiting lists of up to 15 years in some counties in Florida. That means if you lose your home at 60, you might not get approved until you're 75, if you are still alive by then. Local welfare centres are severely understaffed, while grant applications are rejected for a single typo. The familiar story repeats itself. People come seeking help, but only receive a thick file and a cold stare in return. Even more frightening is that some programs have been completely cut. Like Meals on Wheels, the program that delivers meals to the elderly, has been discontinued in some counties in northern Florida due to insufficient funding. That means thousands of elderly people living alone now have to find ways to eat for themselves or not eat at all. And while the welfare system is crumbling, another system operates smoothly: the punishment system. Instead of protecting the homeless, some cities in Florida are criminalizing them. Sleeping in a car is penalized. Setting up tents was dismantled. Distributing food to the hungry was also warned against for violating hygiene regulations. Feeding the hungry was also warned for violating hygiene regulations. The police patrol not to help, but to disperse, threaten, and arrest. The police patrol not to help, but to disperse, threaten, and arrest. The weakest people are considered a threat. The people of Florida used to believe that if they did the right thing, lived decently, paid taxes, and obeyed the law, they would be protected. But now, more and more people are realizing that it is the law-abiding citizens who are the first to be abandoned. Why does a wealthy nation like the United States allow this to happen repeatedly to the very people who trusted and built it? Florida used to be the retirement dream, where the warm sun shines year-round, the beaches stretch endlessly, and peaceful communities allow the elderly to enjoy the rest of their lives. But now, that dream is fading day by day. Not because of the weather, but because of neglect. Thousands of elderly people who once worked their entire lives, once had homes, once paid taxes, now sleep in cars, under awnings, or in makeshift camps in Walmart parking lots. Not because they didn't try, but because the system that promised to protect them is collapsing. The beaches that once only bore the footprints of tourists now bear the marks of wheelchairs, old suitcases, and long lines of weary footsteps searching for a place to sleep at night. Florida is no longer the promised land for everyone. The retirement dream, once promoted with smiles, is gradually becoming an incomplete sleep in the cold and the sound of car horns. And in all of that, there is a terrifying truth. No one thinks this will happen to them. If even those who have done everything right, gone to work, paid taxes, saved their whole lives, cannot even have a roof over their heads in old age. So, how much of the dream we once believed in does this America still hold? Florida, once a paradise for vacationers, now a mirror reflecting the entire United States. A place where the welfare system is crumbling, prices are soaring, and trust is gradually fading. The elderly, who once contributed to building this country, are being left behind in silence. Those who once dreamed of a peaceful retirement now only know how to live day by day, meal by meal. Not because they chose poverty, but because a prosperous America no longer has room for everyone. What did you used to believe about America? And after everything that's happening in Florida, do you still believe in that? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated with our latest videos. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. This video is based on reports, data, and information publicly released from press sources, non-governmental organizations, and statistical data from state authorities. All opinions, analyses, and arguments in the video are intended for educational purposes, social critique, and raising community awareness, not for criticizing any specific individual, organization, or government. We respect all differing viewpoints and encourage viewers to comment in a civilized and responsible manner.